When Pokemon cards, anime, instant ramen made their way to becoming college kids gourmet, and yoga inhibited Hollywood, it was evident Asian was the new cool. Many Asians and Westerners told me that was a good thing. Asians were finally getting the recognition and representation in the Western world. I would lie if I say I didn't feel a sense of pride. In my early years in America, when I was still severely underpaid in all three jobs I was working, I split my excess money between savings and paying for overpriced movie tickets, streaming services, and even Asian merchandise just to feel like I was supporting the Asian community. I watched Crazy Rich Asians 3 times, even though I didn't like the movie all that much. I watched every Asian artist concert I could afford. I knew I was doing much, but at least I was doing as much. But I realized one thing. Each Asian giant that rises casts a giant shadow. I'm not an expert in any Asian culture, history, or language. I'm just a student with much to learn, but I do know just enough to be certain that every Asian element that penetrated the West stands for more than a commercial venture. Yoga, for example, is a spiritual experience in India. Part of the many things it does is still the mind and spirit, to detach it from the materialistic world in order to achieve a higher consciousness. Now it's just a workout routine for the Hollywood elite. Karate-do is in fact a way of life in Japan. Kara means empty and te means hand. Thus, karate means empty hand. It invokes a way of life devoid of materialism. It's about living a life in its most basic form. It is a reminder that as we go through life, the only real enemy is ourselves. Hollywood turned it into a movie, made the lead actor violently fight for his life at the climax. They followed it up with a love story, and then remade it recently, but gave the sensei role to a Chinese actor. BTS is now bleeding blood to establish K-pop beyond its well-known music manufacturing image. They spit their life experiences into their songs, juice out their ideas to create overarching narratives to their albums. They push their bodies to fuse different styles from around the world to their performances. And then what? The West calls them gays, or discredit their creativity to be nothing but an evolution of Motown fused with rap. Never mind that their message is grounded in Asian sentiments and culture. Never mind that they sang all but 3 songs in Korean. Never mind that Korean traditional sound and intonations are in every song they have. An American yells profanities to an Asian guy before returning to his Toyota. And pull back a little and you will realize it's not an isolated incident. Chinatown and Koreatowns were communities of old Asians who barely spoke English. Thanks to American-born Asians and Asian students coming to America, they are now trendy hangout places. Wine and beer sold last decade. It's all about sake and flavored soju. Ramen, Korean barbecue, adobo and lumpia, pad thai, pho, and other cuisines, Asian mothers of thousands of generations cooked in clay pots to serve every night on the dinner table, are now being copied in Michelin restaurants. Each of them claims to be authentic, because authenticity nowadays has nothing to do with its origin. It's all about being able to copy the original the best you can and serving it to other people who have never actually tasted homemade Asian cuisine. More than 3,000 years ago, a set of beautiful literature were introduced to France. It made its way to America, and Disney picked it up and turned it into a billion-dollar franchise. They called it Aladdin. And there are many more. From Asian medicine to literature to clothing, even in our belief. So it's funny when people say we need Asian representation. We may lack Asian actors in Western cinema and Western singers in the airwaves, but Asian culture has long been in America. They've milked billions from it and will continue to do so for years to come. And there are 2 sides of the coin. There's the call to recognize these things as Asian in origin and the complex cultural history so that it stops becoming a trend and becomes an actual genuine reconciliation with its place in American identity. And there are grounds for that call. After all, that's Asian culture the West is benefiting from. Morally and legally, Asians must benefit. But the other side asks, why bother? Why do we need Western recognition? calling for Western recognition means we feel their validation is important. All these elements of Asian culture came about with no influence from the West. Why do we need them now to validate us? All they have is a Hollywood with great cinematographers and directors and stylists that could make even a vampire look hot. Asians have the substance. No matter the number of yoga brands they put out, they will never fully understand the spirit and soul of yoga until they live Hinduism in India. They could turn BTS into fetishes or use them as an object of punchlines, but they will never measure up to the impact of BTS's message and the change they influenced among the young. We can't stop anybody from adopting elements of Asian culture. That's just a price we have to pay for this so-called globalization. We wanted to connect to other countries, we managed to do that, and now everything everyone has is within reach. The question is, what do we do now as Asians? With more than 40 different countries and multiple languages and culture in many of those countries, I doubt there's a unified answer, but we should still answer this for ourselves. Should we join the vigilance of recognition and gratification? After all, that is ours. Or do we pull back our own and make sure they don't get drowned in the superficial, glamorized version of our culture? Because vanity is a difficult enemy to beat. That spotlight is a ticket to public visibility and recognition, and it could darken the rest of the world from our eyes. It could shine so bright enough to blind us from what we really hold dear for thousands and thousands of years. Those things that allowed us to come up with such beautiful expressions of our culture. Our soul and our spirit. Our connection to our community, family, and faith.